Thank you for having me here, okay? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. First of all, it's just a pleasure to be here. So thank you, everyone, for being here in those seats, filling up the seats. A big round of applause for yourselves for filling the seats, for literature and poetry and stories, and also, obviously, to the University of Houston Victoria for having me as well, for having a fantastic series that has quite a reputation outside of this community. So with that, lately I've been finding myself listening to stories for the most part, listening to people's stories. The region I come from, the San Joaquin Valley in California, it's all agricultural farmland. And I think to put it in context, because I'm going to be reading some of the stories and telling some of the stories and poems from that place, it's good to give you a little context. But that region, really encompasses about a 500-mile from one end to the other part of California's belly. And in fact, when you talk about sort of the bigger part of the economy that comes out of California, 65% of it comes from the agricultural industry, approximately. Obviously, if you fact check me, I might be off a couple of numbers, but 65% approximately of the economy comes from its agricultural industry, and that's really the San Joaquin Valley, what you're talking about. It stretches from Bakersfield all the way up to Sacramento. And my job there early on, several years ago, was literally to drive around to the rural parts and ask people about their story. And in fact, when I teach students today, one of the first things I do is I walk into the classroom, and on the first day of class, I say, well, what's your story? And the students go, what? What are you my story? What are you talking? My story? Because I'm a firm believer of starting here, starting where we're from, starting with the magic that we have right here in our own communities. And so I have the privilege to record those. And I find myself now doing that. Back then, it was just kind of part of my job. And now I'm like, even now, I don't get paid for it necessarily anymore. I drive around listening to people's stories. So if I ask you what your story is, just be prepared. That said, I'm going to actually start off by reading I'm going to read a little bit from Breathing in Dust. And I'm going to read a little bit from Natural Takeover of Small Things. And then we're just going to share. We're going to have an exchange, okay? And then, we're going to start off there. That's how I'll start off. All right. So there's this fictional farming community called Catella. That's the beginning of the book there. And it'll speak for itself, hopefully. Catella. What it means to say Catella. To say Catella is to say Chihuahua, Ararat, Greece, Laos, and Medina, all in a single breath. But to live it is a whole other tangle of vines, forged at the bottom of a once lake, ripe with tule foliage and cattails. No eagles perched atop nopal leaves here. No shining constellations or symbols of destiny manifest. Nothing but darkened flesh and muscle and spade and oxen, black as pitch, and a few seeds spilled from a rucksack, brimming with disease and curse and karma long past due. With hunger in their bellies and prosperity somewhere on the back burner, they raked and culled and sowed and reaped day after day, year after year, on an endless workload that always concluded in death, or as the locals refer to it, that hard-earned moment of rest. And then the Southern Pacific Railroad was thrown across the face of it, an iron mass hurtling from one generation into the next, amidst orange groves and almond trees, cutting through the Central Valley like a scythe over golden necks of wheat stalk, arms and ears of corn, falling in the growl of interlinked cargo flats that were toting San Francisco raw steel and Pacific Northwest lumber, past Devil's Ridge, right up to the lip of the Pacific Ocean. And sometimes that train would pass fast enough to cloud Catella in dust. Other times it passed slow enough for a child picker to peek from atop his ladder and pelt the iron snake with a barrage of bad peaches. Everything in Catella is built close to the ground. The highest structure is the bell tower at Holy Family Church, where every day at noon, 12 chimes ring over Catella, summoning the packers and the pickers to lunch, while the homeless sit and watch the whole rhythm go down. A gaggle of lowly dogs bite one another on the ass and yelp and sniff around the trash bins behind the meat market, where Pato, the owner, he tosses a box full of bones and raw shavings at him, and he watches those dogs fight over which one gets the gristle. On the other side of town, Hmong women crouch in their gardens, flooding baby bok choy until the water slithers down and across the road. Meanwhile, their sons and their daughters are mixing it up across town with the Chicano hip-hoppers who buy, sell, and trade car parts, rims that spin at a standstill. Somewhere, the pudgy stay-at-home moms are gossiping about Jesus' sister, Anna, who lost her virginity at age 13 by the boys on her block in a grape field, whispering how they laid her out on raisin paper and took turns. Why, she's got 3 kids now and no man wants her. Beyond this, land, land, and more land, cultivated land or just waiting to be, a pig farm on the outskirts, a driveway made of mud and loose gravel, a house with a dim porch light on where a young boy thumbs over a 3-dimensional globe. His soft fingers roll over the mountains of Appalachia, then south down to Machu Picchu. The boy spins the ball on its axis and he puts his finger on Sweden. He hits the lights, puts himself to bed. And then that little boy listens for the distant clacking of the passing trains, singing. Thank you. Yesterday I was treated to a bunch of meat. It was fantastic. It reminded me when I walked into this giant warehouse that houses that meat. I thought, actually my grandfather, someone who had quite an influence on me growing up, and my grandfather, when I first ever moved out of the small towns of Central California and I was about to move away, my grandfather was there on the last day, and he was kind of propped against his truck, and he goes, where are you going, mijo? Where exactly are you going? And I said, I'm going to Colorado, Grandpa. He goes, he put his hat back on his head, he goes, let me see, oh yeah, Colorado, yeah. Where exactly are you going? I said, I'm going to Boulder, Denver area. And he goes, oh, there's Fort Lupton, there's Greeley. Yeah, those are all home. Mijo, you're going home. He goes, in fact, anywhere in the Southwest you go, you're going home. Because we've lived in all of those places. We know all those places. So you're going home. Don't worry about it. You're going to be good. So thank you, Grandpa. Thank you so much. So whenever he was from Texas himself, from South Texas, and so my grandmother, my grandfather, my own father, so when I come to Texas, I always feel a piece of me coming home, and especially when I'm coming to an area where I see, lots of land and cattle and tractors and gun shops, and, I feel like I'm home. So I go, yeah, this is very much like the San Joaquin Valley, Yeah, I know what it's like here. Okay, good. But one of the earliest memories I have of growing up in the San Joaquin Valley actually was in my garage in the suburbs in the 80s. It was the early 80s, and I must have been maybe like 9 years old or something, 10 years old. And in the suburbs there, it was kind of one of the subdivisions. And I remember it was my Uncle Joe's birthday party, and anybody who knows meat knows that the best way on a birthday to celebrate a birthday is to kill a pig fresh and put it under the ground, and then everybody celebrates. Yes, pig! Wow. And so my uncle, so we did that, right? But except my father wanted to surprise my uncle. My father said, we're going to get this pig, and I'm going to call my friend Animal. His name was Animal. I'm going to call Animal over to the house. I'm going to call Animal over. Animal knows how to do that. He's done it a few times. I've never done it, but Animal knows how. So we're going to have Animal over, and we're going to go out and get the pig, and we're going to bring it home, and we're going to kill it, cook it. All right. And my mom said, sure, honey. Sounds good to me. They brought the pig, and I'll never forget, I was 9 years old. They brought the pig, and they backed it up, okay? We didn't live out in the country. We lived in the suburbs, in a little subdivision, okay? They brought the pig into the subdivision, and they backed up the truck. And this giant cage that was gnarled. It looked like the pig had tried to claw its way out at some point. Gnarled cage comes up. They pull the cage off the truck, and they drop it into the middle of the garage. And I'm 9 years old. I'm back there going, that doesn't look like Wilbur. Run, Wilbur. And so they drop the pig there, and the pig's, just bulky. And so my dad says, hey, Tim, go close the garage. Go close the garage. I go, okay, Dad. Yeah, he goes. That's when we had those big, you didn't have garage door openers. You had the big rope, and you pull the rope down. And everything goes dark, and it's dark in the garage. An Animal finds a light switch, turns it on. They let the pig out of the cage, and the pig is reluctant, doesn't want to come out of the cage. It's like, no, I'm not coming out. Get him out, get him out. They're kicking the cage. My uncle grabs the broom handle, shoves it through the back of the cage, and the pig goes, Rrr! The pig kind of waddles out of the cage. And I'm back there at 9 years old. This time now, I'm making my way to the back of the garage by the door. There's that escape hatch in the back of the garage, and I got my hand on the handle. I'm watching. And so they go, this is what we're going to... So Animal looks at my dad, the experienced one. Animal looks at my dad, and he goes, Felix, do you have a machete or something like that? I can do this job? My dad goes, shoot, I don't know. Let me look around. Let me look at my toolbox, my dad says. Toolbox in Catella, California, toolbox in the San Joaquin Valley. Might look very much like some of the toolboxes you all know, which is a giant orange bin, an orange crate, and just a bunch of stuff thrown in there. So my dad, shoelaces, whatever. There's a bunch of weird things in there. He goes digging through it. Oh, yeah, here's something. Pulls out this giant little ice pick. Little ice pick. Will this work? Animal goes, yeah, you don't have anything else? No. Well, it's going to have to work then. It's going to have to work. Watch where you're swinging it. So anyway, to make a long story short, the way that it works out, the way that it plays out is basically there's no, it's just like a 1, 2, 3, go kind of thing, and I think it took them back, they went back to their earlier days as teenagers when they were, rumbling and all that kind of stuff, because they just started to beat the crap out of the pig, really. My dad just kind of looked at the pig, at the face and just went, and then he went, and then the animal jumps on the back of the pig, and then he goes, and he sticks that thing in the ear canal. And that pig just kind of does this. And lets out this. I'm looking for the handle. I lost the handle. Where's the handle? Where'd the handle go? Anyways, when it was all over, there was like 2x4s involved. I think there was an old tire rim involved. That's how we do it in San Joaquin Valley. We don't know. We're going to have to learn something there. So when it was all over, my dad was kind of cradling the pig on the ground, blood. And he looked at me. I remember, because one of the things, I remember when my parents first told me, we're going to get this pig, we're going to cook it. I remember thinking, I told my dad, I never had real pig before. I was like, it's like real pig. I was like, bacon? I've had bacon? That's real pig? I didn't know. So my dad looked up at me. He said, you better be ready for some real pig. That's a true story. Just to get your morning started. So I think all that meat we ate yesterday was like the revenge. The karma came back. All right. As I said, I was interviewing my grandfather. Spent quite some time interviewing him, actually. And I'm going to read you a small piece of this story on page 59. Let's see. There it is. Where, my grandfather, in the last few years of his life, I started to interview him quite a bit, and I would go to his house, and I would take the video camera. The first time I did it, actually, I thought my grandfather, he might be too wary of the video camera, too aware of it, and just kind of, give me the camera face, the camera stories that are good for the camera. I don't want that, so I want the real stuff. So I went. He had this giant toronja tree in his front yard, this giant grapefruit tree, those big basketball-sized grapefruits. You peel away the skin that thick, and then the little grapefruit's like that big. It's like a golf ball. All right, you have like you have to have 3 of them in front of you just to, get a meal. Anyway, my grandfather had that tree in front of his house. So I set the camera on that tree. Before I knocked on his door, I set the camera on that tree, put the giant basketball-sized grapefruits in front of it, put a little leaf over it. I angled it at the chair in the front yard just to make sure that my grandfather would sit there. I put the chair there. I moved the chair over. All right, perfect. Then I knocked on my grandfather's door. My grandfather comes out, and he goes, oh, yeah, I said, Grandpa, I'm here to talk to you, man, to do the interview, remember? Yeah, I'll be out there right now. Hang on, I'll be out there. Okay. Let me get my shoes on and stuff. Okay. So I go out there and I look again. It's perfect. It's perfect. My grandfather comes out on the front porch, and he's holding a bowl. And he walks over to the table. He's kind of hunched over by this point. He's later in life. He walks over to the table, and in this bowl is some stuff that's just jiggly, like jiggly meats. And it's just jiggly meats. And he goes, and it's just got salt and big peppers, like giant rocks on it. And he goes, mollejas? And gizzards? Mollejas? And I go, what is that? It's the gizzards. And, here I am. I've always been taught that whenever you're about to interview somebody, in interviewing school 101, if you're asking something of them, you also have to kind of comply and give in return. And so I thought the best thing to show my grandfather that I'm down is to eat a molleja. But I never had a molleja. So I grabbed one of the jiggly things. I don't know what it was, but it was going for it. My grandfather, he has those nails, those campesino, those farm worker nails that look like shovel blades, those kind of big old thick nails. So he's just tearing into those things. So I grab one and it's jiggly. Look at my grandpa, he's eating them. Okay, he's not keeling over yet, it's all right. And it's chewy. I don't even know how to stop. So I wash it down. We sit down to start talking. And anyways, my grandfather tells me a story. I'm asking him just questions about his life. He's telling me fantastic, beautiful stories. Stories that I think he's just been waiting to burst forth and tell somebody. He's telling me great stories. And in the middle of the stories, and then the whole time I'm going, man, this is fantastic. I'm getting all of this on video. Not even his own children have heard some of these stories, beautiful stories. And he doesn't know that I'm videotaping him. That's the best part. That's why I do that. That's why I hide it. Then my grandfather, there's another gentleman who goes by on his rickety bicycle, another older gentleman. He goes, Felix, hi. My grandfather looks at him. He goes, hey, Nacho, hey, we got to talk. Nacho goes, okay. He goes, hang on a second, hang on. Hey, mijo, my grandfather looks at me. Mijo, I'm going to go talk to Nacho for a second. Turn off the camera real quick. This story comes on the heels of Cesar Chavez's death in 1993. Which I grew up in about 20 miles north of Delano. So when he died, my mother took us to his procession in 1993, and that was, it's quite an eye-opener. This is on the heels of that, actually a year after. A year after Caesar's death, my grandfather began to fall apart, piece by piece. Not in that way people fall apart when something emotional happens that they can't handle. I mean, his entire body had literally been parceled out. At first, it was the big toe on his right foot. Doctors told him it was jungle rot, the same kind soldiers get if they've been in the trenches too long. And the old campesino told him that the only trenches he'd ever been in were beneath the countless orange groves and endless fields of the San Joaquin Valley. Whatever the landscape, the doctor said it has to be cut off. He told them they were full of shit. It was a matter of insurance, he argued. I bet if the toe was insured, you'd let me find a way to keep it, huh? And then several months later, it was his left lung. They took a small cut for close examination, fearing a cancerous speck that turned out to be nothing. Can you put the piece back? My grandfather joked. Why would you want it back? Because I don't want to get charged. He was at the hospital for 5 weeks before he was forced to return again. But this time it was his stomach. He wasn't keeping food down, so he had to be admitted and fed nothing but liquids. This was the beginning of the end for him. A snip of his stomach was taken and scrutinized. Doctors kept expecting it to be cancer. So did we, but it wasn't. Puzzled, they kept him there for several more weeks of observation. Days into his stay, they took his teeth from him. He had worn dentures his whole adult life, and now that his diet consisted solely of vegetarian cocktails, no need for teeth. So he stopped smiling altogether. 3 weeks later, there it was, when we all had our backs turned to the possibility of death. Cancer was busy, blooming in his crotch like an undetected root. They reasoned with him all they could, the doctors, explaining how much quality time that he would have if they could just delicately, just fragilely, just snip, one quick snip, just do away with his manhood. He told them to go fuck themselves. Certain that if he had the right money this time, or if the piece of meat was insured, they wouldn't be having this conversation. But in the end, off it went. After that, the whole of his skeleton shrunk several inches. He was hatless and bootless, with nothing on except for an onion skin thin cloth that wavered in the breeze and bared his dark ass to the world whenever he turned on his side. Even his mustache had lost its volume. I was sitting at the side of the bed watching his chest rise and fall. It was autumn and raindrops were slapping the windows of his room with both eyes shut. He asked if I could help him up. He raised his hand slowly, and I took it, and I pulled his hand across my shoulder and over my neck, and I put my arm beneath his torso, and I tried to lift my grandfather up, but I couldn't. I grabbed his other arm, and I placed it around my neck now so that he clung to me like a little boy. His skin was loose, and it hung over me like a robe. From this angle, I was able to hoist him up just enough so that he could sit at the edge of the bed. Up, he whispered into my ear. I muscled my arms around my grandfather, and I pulled on his torso again, but it wouldn't budge. Up, he said again, and again I heaved, and again nothing. Cradling him, we sat in silence for several minutes. I felt the nag of gravity calling his body back into the bed, and so I helped him carefully. As soon as his head touched the pillow, his body sighed. And that was the last story that I would hear spill from the old campesino's mouth. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to transition here into some of the poems from Natural Takeover of Small Things. This is the book we have for sale here, right? Yeah. This is my newest collection of poetry. And then I think at the end of this, we'll do a little Q&A, something like that, yeah? All right. Anytime I read poems, especially these poems, because they just got published this year, but I've been writing them for at least the last 8 years, wondering if they would ever get published. So it's kind of exciting, you know, to have them finally see them in a book. But I never recall. I'll never remember the first reading that I ever had. I was, this was like maybe the early '90s, and I was the first time I thought, I think this is what I want to do. You know, for any of you aspiring writers, that's kind of one of the things. And I remember I was living on a friend's couch. I had just graduated from high school, and I was wondering what to do. I was painting quite a bit at the time. I was a visual artist. I was painting. Anytime writers would come into town at Fresno State University, there at Fresno, they'd come into town and speak. I would go out there and display my paintings on the floor and then try and sell some to make some money. That's true. And but at this time, I started to send out little poems here and there. And I sent out a poem to Los Angeles, the big city, Los Angeles, the big city. The big city, Los Angeles. I sent a poem. I sent a couple poems out to this. I don't remember the name of the review. Anyway, they called me. I was living on my friend's couch, and they called me, and they said, "Is this Mr. Hernandez?" I said, "Yeah." And they go, "Sorry to inform you, we're not accepting any of your poems for this one. However, the consolation prize is we would like to invite you to come out here and read your poems." And I went, "Oh, yeah, even better. I'd rather do that. I feel sorry for the other guy who got it published. I get to go read. I get to go read the poem. Yeah, okay, count on me. What day? Okay, yes, 9 o'clock, I'm there." I looked at my friends. I jumped off the couch the first time. I got a gig. I'm going to go read somewhere. They want me to read a poem. Actually, I had to confirm with that. How long do I get to read? How does that work? Oh, yeah, you get to read your poem, the one poem. The one poem? Okay, perfect, one poem. I didn't care. I'm there. I'm going to go read one poem. My friends were happy to see me off the couch. They forked out money to help me pay for a Greyhound ticket and sent me on the Greyhound to Los Angeles to read one poem. And it was just to get him out of the house. God, he's stinking up the place, you know. And I went to Los Angeles, and I didn't even think about the fact that, first of all, I didn't know Los Angeles. I know I have some long-lost cousins. Everyone has long-lost cousins in L.A., right? Right? Yeah, we got cousins in L.A. So, but I didn't think about how I was going to get from the bus station to wherever the reading spot is. Yeah, you know, I didn't know. So I didn't know Dagoberto at the time, so I called him. And so I got to the bus station. Okay, I'm in downtown Los Angeles. It's on Alameda and something else there. Downtown L.A., a bunch of abandoned warehouses. Yeah, I didn't know. So I'm sitting there at the bus station, just fiddling my thumbs, and I go, oh gosh, it's about 7:30, the reading's at 9, I got about an hour and a half to be there. How am I going to get there? I got $3 left in my pocket, just $3. And so I walked over to the lady behind the counter. I said, "Do you know how to get to a place called, let me see here, what is this place called? Olvera Plaza? Right? That's the little sort of hub there. Now it's like a little tourist mecca. But at the time I didn't know. Olvera Plaza. Oh, honey. I goes, oh, honey. Olvera Plaza is just down the street. Oh, it's just, oh, God, my luck. Down the street? Yeah, it's right down the street. Perfect. Okay. Got my stuff on. Got my backpack. What? You're not about to walk over there, are you? Down the street. Oh, Frankie, come here, Frankie. Tell this man why he shouldn't be walking up the street over there like Olvera Plaza. Oh, dude, I'm from here. I won't even walk up that street. All right. So how do I get there? She said, it's about 3 or 4 miles. Maybe you can ask one of those cab drivers out there to take you. I seen a bunch of the coyotes also lined up out there, all the guys ready to transport. They're all back there. And I thought even about asking one of them, but then I was like, I shouldn't take my chances. So went up to the taxi driver. I got $3. He just, get out of here. All right. I'm just up the street, $1 a mile, $3. Get out of here. All right. Nighttime started to come in. And just then as the night started to come, I was like, the palm trees have graffiti on it. Who graffitis a palm tree? There's a palm tree. It's got graffiti on it. Who does that? How'd they get up there? Man, the leaves. It's crazy. And I started to remember at that moment, I had just read the autobiography of Richard Ramirez, The Night Stalker. The Night Stalker. Remember that in the 80s? The man who was, the murderer who nobody could find. But East LA found him and beat him up and turned him in. Anyway, I read it, and the whole place that he hung around at, his main hangout, his little den, was that bus station. And I started to remember it at that late at night. Started to set in. I was like, oh, the Night Stalker. Damn. I looked across the street. I saw the Golden Arches McDonald's beaming, like go in the dark. And I went, oh, yeah, I'm going to go over there first because it was right on the corner of the street. I got to walk up. I got to the Golden Arches, and I look up the street. And it's just a dark tunnel. From McDonald's, that corner is just a dark tunnel that goes for like 3 or 4 miles. Just all dark tunnel at night. And all you see is a little tiny little needle point of light somewhere at the end of that tunnel. And I knew that was probably Olvera Plaza. And I had to get from here, the Golden Arches, to Olvera Plaza. So I go into McDonald's, and I do the smartest thing I could do at the time, which is I said, here's the $3. I want the biggest, hottest, not the stuff that's been sitting there for 3 hours, but a brand new, fresh, hot pot of coffee. Right now, the biggest one you got. All right. So now I had fuel, right? And I had a weapon. All right. I had those 2 things going for me. So I started to walk up the street, looking at it. I can do this. I started to walking. All of a sudden, you hear little rats scuttling. Damn, still a little bit of water. I wasted all my coffee. Oh, shit. What do I do now? So I started to run. I was running. 1 poem. Mr. Hernandez, you can read your 1 poem. 1 poem. I was like, man, the whole way I was reading, I was thinking, I'm going to have to read a long poem. I have to read a long. What do I got? I'll read like 3 of them, call it 1. Anyway. So I finally get there. After all that craziness, I get to this place. And I had been building it up in my mind, too. Los Angeles, man, that's the land of poets. Bet you they're all there. Can't wait to get there. It's going to be a room like this with all these vibrant, different faces, people energized about literature, yes. And I get to the door of this little spot at the Olvera Plaza because I finally make it, right? But I'm all sweating, so I'm airing myself out outside before I go in. And I can hear to the door, the door is cracked open, the front door, and I can hear music blasting and cups, clanking down on tables and discussions. Hey, we just, yeah, Ginsberg, yeah, Gilb, yeah. All these fantastic conversations going on. And I think to myself, oh, yes, can't wait to get in there. Finally, I'm dried off. I open the door. There's like 4 people sitting around a little table with a boombox. I go, and then this one guy looks at me, the owner, he goes, you must be Tim Hernandez. I said, yeah. Where's everybody? He goes, this is it, dude. This is everybody. This is our circle. I was reading it. We're the ones that put the magazine together and all that. We're the ones that called you. Right on. I go, all right. So after that, I had to, 1 poem. It's like, oh, man. So I finally, when they call my name, after I endured about it, there's only 4 or 5 of us total, and I endured like an hour and a half before I got to go up. And so this is the poem I read. I actually put that little moment in here. My breath grows shallow and my head spins. I catch myself by shutting my eyes and taking myself home for a second. The wilted ditch banks and faces of the kids diving in and out of the mud holes enter my mind. The crop dusters swooping over, forgotten dogs wandering the back roads of Catella come to me. The train tracks come to me. The fog and sun and drought come to me. The valley whole comes to me. And I stare at these words on my paper, the first three especially, and I begin to read. When I die, I want great ceremonies illuminating gray sulk of olive branches and junk piles, where as a child I threw volcanic stones at abandoned engines to witness the resonance echo against saffron foothills in autumn, and how the swallowtails fled their mud nests and swarmed with the bats in dusk, where in the shelter of lemon trees we sexed and discovered pleasurable sins, and we made promises no sentient beings could keep. I want still shots of these merciless streets that boot-stomped homeboys and honky-tonk alleys and soft-spoken cowboys who cocked cold triggers to their temple igniting 4th of July. Panoramas of flamenco red whirling in an empty room with a dark-skinned Mexican healer woman swooning men with hips like cliffs without end. I want ballads and nursery rhymes and the morning breath of newborns washed over my skin. I want these fields on fire once the last fruit has been plucked and the workers have moved on to the calling crops beyond, and then carry my body to that gnarled plum tree uprooted by vast trembling monsters, where ethanol and torches await along the carbon quiet side of dawn, where roosters caw and cluck the landscape. And then gather up the loose vines and the sweetest raisins. Gather jackrabbit and opossum, and summon the gardener in his blue sage blessings, and the long-haired lowriders and the pierced-tongued punks. Call on the construction workers, tell them to bring their hammers and nail guns. There's work to be done. Call the prisons and tell them one of their own has flown the bars. Let the truckers ride the hammer lane home. I want sacrifices of swine and bull, stark naked testimonies of hard and holy life, the infant mind bared before the village, expressions of woeful hearts betrayed, innocence dropped in round, sloppy sobs, begging lungs full of forgiveness, furious anger and fists pummeling hardpan, quaking tantrums to open the earth. I want vows taken to plunge the frightful depths of the unknown. Never cease for fear of that laughable horizon that goes untouched, and then a silent cigar that never ends. Wind horses thundering these valley floors, everyone and everything, divine drunk, stuttering the narrow present. Thank you. I'm going to read, I think, this last poem, and then we'll go into a Q&A, okay? I'll hand it back over. Here, in this book, but I have my notes in this book. I'm going to end with this fantastic poem that I wrote called My Name is Hernandez, and it's actually after a poem that Martin Espada wrote. I don't remember what he called his, but the idea of writing poems about our names, because it's led me into a whole other new book project that I've been working on that has nothing to do, it has only to do with names. So I think it's just a nice sort of piece to end it on. My name is Hernandez. It means descendant of Hernan Cortés, said Spaniards who slayed Moctezuma in the nation of Or, occupied territories known since as Southwest, enslaved captives who stewed in venomous marshes of mud and thicket, forced to shoulder slabs of glass shard obsidian, tear tule from the root, mule the rotund mounds of clay of mountain crags named for gods with uncollected debts. But I am not this dramatic by any means. I watch television in my boxer shorts. I eat sardines straight from the can, and I breathe on my children's faces just to watch them shriek. My name is Hernandez. My father is a field worker. Every sugar beet you've ever eaten, he's shorn away what threatened to destroy it. When I was born, he wore me on his back while slouching over a short-handled hoe in the monsoon plains of 5 Wyoming summers. There's too much time for memory to be accurate. My father's worked since the day of his conception, a shoeshine boy in the parlors of South Texas. The adobe tiles were relics from days of indentured servitude. Earthen red clay shingles the boy destroyed with his rifle. Mesquite is what he recalls mostly. and how the chicharra's song is a quantum thread between this life and that. And I see him now behind the wheel of a rig, hazardous materials, head a snow-capped slab of insidious worry. He is illuminated by the coup of a grandson, the most fragile ammonite coiled in the shape of his own hand. My name is Hernandez. I was born of a woman who was born of a woman, though I've said this once before. Don't let her flexible disposition fool you. Consider the blade of a palm leaf on Palm Sunday. Consider the Sabbath, Ash Wednesday. She is devoted to the countdown of years, starting from 10. Her time here is limited. Same is true for the rest of us, except she has gotten good at forgetting this. We haven't. We miss. She lets on a permanence not seen since the resurrection. My name is Hernandez, of a Dinuba sanitarium that crumbled in 1989, of an elementary school hidden between a plum orchard and the voluptuous golden thigh of a foothill, of an education that included the neon powder of sulfur, of flea markets and strip malls, of menial jobs, fast food dives, and an auto detailing stint of 30 days in the Tulare County Jail and then 5 more, of relationships to things and people that rarely go the distance, of constantly risking solitude, of the grandfather on Magnolia Way who pickles eggs in a tin shed behind the sulking house with 2 mortgages, of regrets, of saying words like regret because it's expected, of reneging on words, of doctoring the wounds with words, of admitting he knows nothing of words. Years ago, while living in South San Francisco, I walked into a meat market with my last name emblazoned on the window. A young man draped in a blood apron greeted me. I ordered 3 tacos de lengua, and smiling, I told him that I was a Hernandez too. Yes, he replied, handing me my change. Dicing the cow's last word on the cutting block, he said, there are millions of us here. Millions of Hernandezes, each one expecting some kind of deal. Thank you so much. Sticking around, and we've probably got a few minutes just to do a Q&A, so we'll, yep, anyone got a question? Yes, sir.
I've got colleagues here who teach writing, I happen to teach speech, but in both of those we like to encourage students to find their voice, to get excited about self-expression, that they too have something to say. And you mentioned at the outset that you'll often come into a class, first day of class, tell me your story. As a teacher myself, tell me, how do you use stories and students telling their stories as a way to help them discover their voice, to get excited about that they too have something to say?
Yeah, I think we always, you know, at least, and I'm generalizing obviously, but I think we always sort of think that the magic is outside of us, outside of our communities, outside of our homes, that the magic is elsewhere. So, you know, certainly as a young writer, you know, starting to begin to write, but also even as an artist, even just as a human being, you know, I mean, that's what, you know, there's that fantastic sort of little, that sort of little joke that goes, you know, there was a scientist and a writer, and they were arguing over which one was more critical to the existence of the planet, and the scientist said, everything comes down to an atom, and then the writer said, and every atom has a story, you know? And so, and I think that's the idea, is to awaken us, each of us individually, and even the communities I go speak to outside of classrooms, to the power of our own stories, you know, asking our elders their story, asking each other, what's your story? Even that, I think, is, I see that sort of light going, like, oh, I do have a story, you know, that is, it's different than asking someone to write a story, you know, it's much different. So I think it's just awakening to that magic of who we are and that we have in our own homes and in ourselves, yeah. Yeah, you know, so.
Yeah. You talked about your grandfather a lot. Was your grandfather the storyteller in the family?
You know, all of my family, you know, I mean, I think we all have that also. Again, you know, if we just listen, you know, and holidays, or even just sitting around, gathered around the kitchen and all of that. And, you know, these are all stories that, you know, I think we dismiss, you know, we grow up with, and they become sort of part of our DNA. But, you know, we don't ever sort of think outside, you know, from that sort of bigger picture. And when I started to, I had a few poems, I mean, a few pieces together, and I started to think about a collection of stories. That's the first place I went to, was, oh gosh, I got a well of stories that I grew up with. Let me start with those, you know, and so, yeah. But yeah, my grandfather, all my family, you know, but it was just my grandfather because he was the only grandparent I had. And you know, at one point he was the only grandparent I had left. And I thought someone should get his story down. So I started to record him. And that's why I think he comes out quite a bit, because he's the only one I actually sat and spent hours with recording.
I have a question, because some of the things that you said, I remember us doing it. I would go to my aunt in the country. Did you eat the pig?
I certainly did. I had to. You know, you gotta eat the pig.
We didn't get the whole pig, but it was made a big old cabeza.
Oh, big old cabeza.
That hole in the dirt.
Yeah, the cabeza, yeah.
Delicious.
Yeah.
So good.
And that's how we were raised. I mean, my parents used to kill the pig and cook it underground. And to this day, I still make lengua. I mean, my grandkids love the tongue. I mean, they love it. They do. Menudo, you name it. You have to kind of bring them up.
Yeah, that's right.
In the culture.
Yeah, that's right. I live in Boulder, Colorado now, and people shriek whenever my children eat menudo. They're like, what? You're eating what? The stomach lining and all that stuff, and all the jiggly things involved in there. I love that stuff. Good stuff. Yeah.
So we've enjoyed your acting this morning.
Thank you.
Can you tell me what other things you've done? Because I've said you're an actor.
Yeah, you know, I started out probably doing all, you know, I had a third grade teacher. I'll start there. A third grade teacher in the small town of Cutler Rossi in the San Joaquin Valley, a third grade teacher who used to teach us poetry, and then she would actually have us perform the poems. That's where it all started, I think, for me, you know, having them perform the poems. And then also just about a week ago, last week I was in California, and I saw some uncles I hadn't seen in years, like 20 years. And I grew up with them probably, from 0 to like maybe at least 12 years old. I haven't seen them since then, maybe. And I started to see them, and I go, I think this is what informed a lot of sort of the acting, a lot of the sort of physicality also, seeing the way that they talk, you know, always waving their hands and boisterous and moving around, and, you know, it's like always that kind of stuff. And I go, yeah, that, you know, for some reason it resonated. But yeah, I did a lot of acting, painting also early on. I started to also paint quite a bit. I studied painting for a while. Did you read? No, that's the fantastic Veronica Gonzalez, the graphic designer who did that. So yeah, I did a lot of that also. I did a lot of painting and acting. And then when I got into college, I formally studied theater also and stuff. But you know, I've gotten to a point, I think, where I just said, you know, it informs the way I'm presenting now. I don't have to think too much about it anymore. You know, I don't like to plot things out so much anymore, rather than just kind of naturally, because we're all natural storytellers. You know, all of us are. So, yeah. Another question here?
As far as storytelling goes, creatively, when ideas come to you, when do you know which are the poetry ideas and which are the prose ideas?
Yeah, I know. I don't know. And, you know, sometimes they start out as poems and they evolve into a story, and sometimes they devolve, or no, they evolve to a poem. I shouldn't say devolve. They evolve forward to a poem, you know, they do. You know, I think that's one of the things, though, is I also stopped kind of telling myself, you know, creating these delineations, you know, like blur those lines and, you know, forgetting about form. I mean, obviously you study that and it becomes a foundation, but then at some point you just forget about them, you know, because you let the story and the sort of inspiration, just, for me, I let it tell me where to go. So, yeah. Couple more?
Speaking of names, what does the Z stand for?
Zorro. It stands for it's my mother's maiden name, Zuniga. Zuniga, yeah. 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 There's also a sculptor artist in Arizona named Tim Hernandez, too, and people once, when I started to kind of go out and travel, they'd say, are you the sculptor? Do you do sculpture by any chance? I was like, no, I'm not that guy. I wish, you know, I'll take his credit, though. but anyways, yeah. Well, maybe one more question? No? All right. All right, thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, you took the announcement.